This was so deceptive that I'm still holding out hope that Zach Lowe joins the team. But listen to Bill, how much he plays up this new addition to the Ringer.
Channel. Speaking of the Ringer, big announcement coming from us this week. Very, very, very excited about it. Keep an eye out for it early in the week. We are making an addition to the Ringer Podcast Network and to Spotify. And I'm pumped. So keep your eyes out.
Okay, he played that up. We even had 3 varies before excited. And this is not too long after Zach Lowe reemerged after Luka Doncic was traded. When he reemerged, he posted a mini podcast that was just short of 18 minutes. It now has 4.1 million views, so it went viral. And then obviously this news led to even more speculation because people have been clamoring for Zach Lowe to join the Ringer ever since he was fired from ESPN, including myself. There's actually another video where I said how much sense it would make, and it does make a lot of sense. And then if you go, so on the NBA subreddit is where I saw someone else mention this, and this is what I was thinking too. But I thought maybe I'm missing something because I know the Ringer Network has so many different podcasts that I do not listen to. Really, all I'm interested is in Bill and Bill's guests. Like I really like Ryan Russillo when he joins Bill. I also like Kirk Goldsberry. So those are my 2 favorites. And then if Zach Lowe joined, that would just be um, absolute domination from the Ringer. I think they would take over sports content at that point, or at least NBA content. But I'm not the only one who thought this. And if you look on the Bill Simmons subreddit, people are constantly, there's a lot of talk about Zach Lowe. So it says Zach Lowe is at the live pod tonight, and I did not know. I've actually been to the Bill Simmons live podcast. I went to Denver to watch it, and I was in San Antonio, and I went up to Denver to go watch it just because I thought it would be cool to see Bill Simmons in person, and it was a good experience. Let's see, Bill doing okay. I don't know how this leads to, so it's still loading, but the point is that other people are talking about Zach Lowe. Zach Lowe is in demand, and then he just showed his market value with this reemergence after the Luka trade. So it's just a natural fit. He would go in so well, and I think there'd be a synergy between him and possibly Ryan Russillo. I don't know. I can't right now picture exactly how they'd work together because Zach Lowe, he's more. He's not as, he doesn't have as much as the humor angle, but I can see it working. And then of course, if I think Kirk Goldsberry is a real talent. I think he's I like listening to him. Like when he even I think even without Bill, I would be interested in what he has to say. But when Bill's there, both Russillo and Goldsberry work, and I think Zach Lowe could work on his own. But I think Zach Lowe could also flow into the Bill Simmons podcast, and it would work out nicely. So this is so obvious, and I'm really surprised he's not on the Ringer yet, given how large they've expanded. But part of the problem with their expansion is they haven't had the name recognition to go. And by the way, I've been talking this whole time, and I haven't even said it looks like it's Amy Poehler. And by the way, I recognize her, but I'm not. She's not anybody I would like listen to a podcast. I wouldn't listen to her podcast, but I know that the Ringer has all sorts of pop culture and movies. And I don't pay attention to any of it, so it seems like she's a celebrity edition. But for Bill to play it up that much on his own podcast, and I know Bill cares more about movies and media and comedy celebrities outside of sports, but I don't, and I think there's a lot of the Bill Simmons podcast subscribers that don't pay attention to it either. But we know that the Ringer has expanded to so much more because I'm presuming that this content is extremely valuable, and the viewership, if it's on video, and people who are listening are valuable for the advertisers. This isn't something that interests me at all. And I thought, like, along with so many others, that given how much Bill was playing this up, it was like right there for Zach Lowe. And I was looking for the podcast to be released Tuesday, Wednesday, right? It's going to come out, and then we're going to see Zach Lowe has joined the Ringer, and it's just this dream team that has been assembled, and now we're just getting content on the days, the in between days of Bill Simmons' podcast, and then possibly Zach Lowe's got one. Anyways, it was all set up, and it was going to be nonstop content, and I think it would easily work monetarily. So even if Zach Lowe is commanding a higher rate, one option here is just to not that he has his own podcast, and that it's it's a part-time work. It's not full-time work. I don't even know if that's possible with NBA podcasting, because I know Zach Lowe puts in a lot of research and he's really watching the games. So maybe that's not possible, but maybe there's some kind of contracting in between where Zach Lowe can be on part-time, or like just a part show, but a full show obviously works best. But it would be nice to see him joining the Ringer banner. This is a natural fit, and something that's really, it just seems like it's obvious. It's like it's laying right there, and so many people on the Bill Simmons subreddit talk about this. So let's actually go with the announcement. So someone had this title: Zach Lowe joining the Ringer soon, and question mark, and then him showing out of nowhere to discuss the Luka trade felt like an unofficial announcement he was getting back into it. Exactly. That's everything. The dominoes, like everything was in sync. Everything was lined up. And then someone wrote, "My theory is Lowe intended to take a full year off and wait until next season, but the Luka trade was so insane that he couldn't hold back any longer." Yeah, and there's people are excited about it. Please be Zach. I missed having a reasonable national voice. Zach on the Ringer would be the best thing possible that could happen right now. Sorry to spoil the thread, but it's Amy Poehler. Yeah, it's like, I think for such a large percentage of listeners, this is like okay, but now Zach Lowe, have Zach Lowe join next. This should be pinned. I'm disappointed, not because it's Amy Poehler, but because I was hoping it was Zach after he popped out recently. Yeah, it's like nothing. There's nothing against Amy Poehler, but it's like if you're listening to Bill Simmons, like if you are active, if like you're subscribed to his podcast, then you would hope that Zach Lowe would join, because Zach Lowe is right there. He's so the overlap in the demographic interest would be such a high percentage. It's just a natural fit. Someone wrote, "I still can't believe ESPN let him go." Yeah. And I had an earlier episode about this. It's just like, first of all, for ESPN to let him go, he's such a tremendous asset. So many people like him. And one other thing though is, when you start thinking about the efficient allocation of resources, I think he actually does just fit better. He fits better at the Ringer. Like, I think you would get more viewership, more listeners, more subscribers if he's on the Ringer than if he's on ESPN. And I think there's just a better synergy with him and some of the other NBA podcasters that's going to work out better. So even though it's somewhat surprising that ESPN fired him, it makes sense, because he doesn't fit as well within the fabric of ESPN. They're more sensational. They're quick. It's about the surface level NBA stories. And then Zach Lowe is going to be more in depth. He studies the game. He actually watches the games. He actually knows the players. And not only can he podcast, but he could write about it. But maybe in this transition to the Ringer, he ends up becoming a full-time podcaster like Bill has done. I also like it when Bill writes every now and then. It wasn't a long form recently, but he did have his trade value ranking, and he actually wrote on it. And I like when if Bill writes an article, I'll usually read that as well. But he's obviously transitioned to podcast. He's still extremely good with that. But his long form, I don't know if I have if I myself or anybody else now has the attention to continually read long form, but Bill's long form content was unreal. Like, it was so good when he was at ESPN and Grantland. And I think, was it page 2 too? Let's see. If it's Zach Lowe, I will be the happiest podcast listener ever. I'm down to listen to Bill Simmons one and the KOC one. I don't really care for any others. I have tried quite a few. The mismatch is pretty good. I don't want to hate on KOC, but it got stale at the end. Verno and Jacoby and their banter is great. Personally, I can't stand listening to Wozni. It would be a big signing, low floor, extremely high ceiling. Yeah, this this comment's like I wrote it. This is what I would be thinking. It's like you know exactly what you're getting. There's not really a downside. They've got to. There's easily a way to figure out. Here's how we meet these minimum ad dollars that we need, and from there on out, it's just a matter of how much money do you make. So yeah, I don't I don't see why this hasn't happened yet. This is such a natural progression. The only thing is the only other theory here. Someone wrote "sell high, buy low." That's a good one. The only other theory here is that they're waiting. Right, Zach Lowe's just not ready to come back. So if that's the case, obviously that's understandable. But from that podcast, it looked like Zach Lowe was already in form, ready to go, and interested in the NBA season. So there was also the possibility that Zach Lowe was just possibly doing something else, but he's NBA through and through. He can't help this. And then it's just a natural. It's natural that he joined the Ringer. So I think this has to be inevitable at some point. It really doesn't. It makes the most sense that he would join the Ringer rather than trying to have his own independent podcast. Although if he did, I think that would be successful. But I think it's just easier. Zach Lowe is someone he comes across as this guy wants to focus on the NBA. Doesn't want to focus on production and advertisers. That's it's that's a whole separate project for him that he doesn't need to do. Uh, so if Zach Lowe has a YouTube channel, if he has his own podcast, I'm going to listen to that. But it would be even better if he joined up with the Ringer, and then why not make the Ringer the destination for real content? We know that ESPN, they're always going to get the most views in the casual audience, but for anybody that's looking for just something beneath the surface, something beyond the latest Lakers headline, then you're naturally going to end up at the Ringer, and you might anyway. So I think this is an inevitability, but it still hasn't happened yet, and it's right there. It's like this is actually something that Bill Simmons would be discussing on his own podcast if it wasn't something that implicated him, and he might not want to talk about it for various reasons, but it's the obvious. It is so obviously the elephant in the Ringer room.